Good afternoon. The first item of business is portfolio questions. At question number 1, I call Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of its relations with the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
The Scottish Government welcomes collaboration between Scottish parliamentarians and other parliaments, including through the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, or BIPA as it's known. BIPA provides a useful platform for MSPs to engage with counterparts across these islands. And I thank Ms Ewing and the other Scottish members of BIPA for their contributions. I'm particularly pleased to welcome the reconvening of the BIPA plenary, which will take place in Weybridge from the 12th to the 14th of October. And the Scottish Government also places great value in our partnership with Ireland, as seen by the Ireland-Scotland bilateral framework. The framework acknowledges the importance of BIPA in deepening parliamentary connections.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. The British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, as he rightly acknowledges, plays a very important role in bringing parliamentarians from across these aisles together to debate the key and important issues of the day. In fact, further to recent changes to its, what I would say, excellent committee structure, representatives of the devolved and other jurisdictions can now play a greater role in the work of the committees. And so will the Cabinet Secretary therefore undertake to contact the BIPA Secretariat to reconfirm the Scottish Government's commitment to the Assembly and, where appropriate, to offer support?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the new Ireland-Scotland bilateral framework 25 to 30 reasserts our commitment to BIPA. Specifically, it commits the Scottish Government and the Irish Government to, and I quote, strengthen parliamentary links, recognising the role of the British-Irish Parliamentary Association plays in this regard, with regular contacts between the Oireachtas and the Scottish Parliament, and we can give a supportive reply, though the framework itself won't be published until the 26th of November. So the answer is yes. I'd be happy to undertake to contact the BIPA Secretariat to reaffirm the Scottish Government's commitment to BIPA and to offer appropriate support.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Regular cooperation with other governments across the British Isles is vital. At the Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum in March, 13 parliamentarians from 11 parties in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland met to discuss issues of mutual interest. However, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones MP, only offered to appear virtually, eventually downgraded to a 15-minute slot. Freedom of information showed his diary to be empty other than work on the spending review, then some 12 weeks away. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concern and those of other parliamentarians across the devolved assemblies and parliaments that a UK minister seems happy to show devolved administrations such casual disrespect?
With regards to the substantive question.
Well, firstly, can I take the opportunity to publicly welcome Mr Jones to his role as Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster following the UK Government's latest reshuffle. It is crucial that UK Government ministers engage meaningfully with devolved governments and parliamentarians, especially in relation to the budget, given the impact that spending decisions at Westminster have on Scotland. And given he now has responsibility for intergovernmental relations, I would urge Mr Jones to pursue a good level of engagement with my ministerial colleagues and I, as well as the Parliament and parliamentarians. More broadly, the Scottish Government did welcome the UK Government's commitment to reset its relationship with the devolved nations. However, I must tell the Chamber that we have become increasingly concerned about the extent to which that relationship has truly been reset. Several high-profile problems in intergovernmental working have occurred over the first year of the UK Government's term, and I hope Mr Jones takes note of that and works to forge better collaboration to ultimately benefit the people of Scotland.
Question number 2 has been withdrawn. Question number 3, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support libraries within local communities.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government's targeted support for public libraries is through our annual funding totalling £935,000 to the Scottish Library and Information Council, and includes the Public Library Improvement Fund that supports creative and innovative public library projects throughout Scotland. The 2025-26 successful PLIF projects are due to be announced soon. We also provide targeted support to school libraries that amounts to £150,000 in recognition of their important role in education through the School Library Improvement Fund. And more generally, public library policy is devolved to local authorities, meaning our general revenue funding to councils also supports libraries across the country.
Colton McGregor.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Both Coatbridge Library and Christen Library are among the key community hubs in my constituency. They now include digital zones, study spaces and community programmes. The third place idea is increasingly recognised by the Scottish Government through strategies in community wellbeing, place-based regeneration and digital inclusion. Can I ask what steps the Scottish Government are taking to encourage the use of libraries such as those mentioned in Coatbridge and Christen as community wellbeing hubs and social spaces for isolated or vulnerable groups?
Secretary.
Well, I commend Mr McGregor for his question. He's absolutely right, and the Scottish Government recognises the vital role libraries play as so-called third places, so welcoming, inclusive spaces that support wellbeing, digital inclusion and community connection. That's why we fund SLIC's Public Library Improvement Fund, supporting projects that blend culture, health, social impact and other factors. And one such example is Return Journeys, a programme that helped under-reach groups reconnect with libraries, which I had the pleasure of seeing firsthand in Falkirk last year. It's a powerful example of how libraries in Scottish communities are evolving into trusted wellbeing hubs, much like in Coatbridge and Christen.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Libraries are proven to be a boost for literacy, particularly among children from disadvantaged backgrounds. At least 16% of public libraries in Scotland have closed since 2008, while a quarter of pupils moving to secondary school struggle to read, write and count properly. Therefore, does the Cabinet Secretary accept that closing libraries can not be improving children's literacy outcomes?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, may I say, for the obvious reason that Mr Stewart states, any effort, any place that helps with literacy and learning is something that I'm keen to be supportive of. But we also need to be open-minded to new ways in which libraries can provide services to people, young and old. And I mentioned the potential role that libraries can play as so-called third places, where people can go to support wellbeing endeavours, learn about digital inclusion and wider community connection. And I would encourage him, his party and others right across the chamber to do what they can to help local authorities who have responsibility for libraries in their areas to adopt this approach. And I'm sure that that will maximise the retention of the library network across Scotland, which is something I am supportive of.
Neil Bibby.
Access to libraries is hugely important for people of all ages, but particularly our children and young people. But last week the Herald reported that around 1 in 10 of Scotland's libraries have closed in the last decade under this SNP government's watch. Many school libraries are being cut in Scotland as well due to the underfunding of our local councils. The UK Labour government recently pledged to ensure that every primary school in England will have a library. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary again, how will we improve literacy in Scotland when our libraries and our school libraries continue to be closed? And what assessment has the government made on access to libraries for our children and young people?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can gently say to Mr Bibby, in my initial answer I gave quite a lot of detail about the level of support that the Scottish Government provides to libraries, both directly and indirectly. He, of course, does know that library provision is devolved to local government. But I encourage him that if he is as keen on financial support for libraries, rather than abstaining in budget votes or voting against them like the Tories did, he'd have a little bit more credibility on the subject if he actually voted for the increases that have been provided to support libraries.
Question number 4, Claire Hawley.
To ask the Scottish Government regarding the implementation of its international strategy, how and by what mechanisms it's engaging with the governments of other European nations.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government engages proactively with European counterparts through bilateral partnerships, multilateral forums and cultural diplomacy, including a busy programme of inward and outward visits through our network of international offices, including key European hubs in Berlin, Paris, Dublin and Copenhagen, alongside Scotland houses in Brussels and London. We promote Scottish interests, build partnerships and attract investment. Maintaining close relations with our European neighbours is essential to help mitigate the damage of Brexit, for which Scotland never voted.
Claire Hawley.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Scotland is demonstrating via this strategy that we are a country able and prepared to play its part as a member of the international community, and it is clear that countries want to engage with Scotland. Scottish Government offices are an essential component of this. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how the Scottish Government actively assesses the reach of these offices and their importance in pursuing the Government's objectives and commitment to tackling global issues such as the climate emergency?
Cabinet Secretary.
We have 9 offices in our international network, most of which are hosted in the British Embassy or High Commission alongside UK and Welsh and Northern Irish teams. We include Scotland House London in that network because it serves to engage the diplomatic community at the Court of St James as well as the global financial markets in the city. I've had useful dialogue in the course of my time as Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs with the Constitution, Europe and External Affairs and Culture Committee on exactly this question of assessing reach and impact, and I was very glad to accept their recommendation that we publish an annual report explaining how the work of these offices contributes to the goals of our international strategy, and we will publish the next such annual report in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Question number 5, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what representations NGOs have made to it regarding its work to support humanitarian assistance in Palestine.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
The Scottish Government receives regular updates from a number of humanitarian organisations regarding the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Palestine, including UN agencies such as UNICEF, UNRWA and UNOCHA, the Disasters Emergency Committee and our Humanitarian Emergency Panel members. Those include the British Red Cross, Christian Aid, Islamic Relief, Mercy Corps, Oxfam, Save the Children, SCIAF and Tear Fund. We're also collaborating with Kids Operating Room to establish the Gaza Hopes Field Readiness Hub in Dundee, which will support a rapidly deployable hospital in Gaza to provide essential surgical, maternity and paediatric services and support the longer-term recovery of the healthcare sector in Gaza.
Ruth Maguire.
And thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Global Summit Flotilla is a coalition of everyday people who believe in human dignity and the power of non-violent action. All 42 boats in this historic mission were illegally intercepted while attempting to break Israel's siege on Gaza. 462 people were kidnapped in international waters, including Scottish citizens. Does the Cabinet Secretary share in my dismay at reports of the terrible treatment of these humanitarians? And can I ask what representations the Scottish Government has made, either directly to Israel or through the UK Government, and what response they received?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I begin my answer by paying tribute to the Scottish and other international members of the humanitarian mission of the Summit Flotilla. Scottish Government officials have been in daily contact with the UK Government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, including over the weekend, seeking urgent clarification on repatriation arrangements for the residents of Scotland detained by Israel. The FCDO told us that they had lobbied the Israeli authorities to make clear that they expected the situation to be resolved safely, in line with international law and with due respect for the rights of those on board. All 4 residents of Scotland have now been deported from Israel, and at least 1 is back in Scotland, with 3 deported to Jordan. The FCDO told us earlier today that consular officials are supporting all British citizens deported to Jordan.
Jamie Halker-Johnston.
In June, I asked the Cabinet Secretary to assure Parliament that no funding from the Scottish Government to UNRWA was used or was being used to treat Hamas terrorists. His response suggested that he couldn't give that assurance, but that he was meeting UNRWA the next day and would raise my concerns with them. So can I ask him, did he raise those concerns with UNRWA? And what assurances did they give him that Scottish taxpayers' money as humanitarian aid provided by SNP ministers was not used to treat Hamas terrorists?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first off, I'm sorry that the member couldn't find it in his heart to thank the UN agencies providing humanitarian support in a genocide that is currently taking place in Gaza, rather than casting shade.
Point of order, Jamie Halker-Johnston.
Thank you. I asked this question in June. I didn't get an answer then. I've made it very, very clear. I appreciate that the Cabinet Secretary would like to dance around, but I did ask a fairly straightforward question
as a follow-up. Thank you, Mr Halker-Johnston. Cabinet Secretary.
Indeed, didn't even listen to the answer to the question before he asked a point of order. I'm not aware of any humanitarian aid being used in the way Mr Halker-Johnston suggests, and if I receive any reports of that, I will share it with him. I'm sorry he couldn't take the opportunity in his point of order either to condemn the genocide or the humanitarian situation being waged against the people of Gaza.
Let's ensure we hear one another. Question number 6, Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government regarding its role in proposing the scheduling of parliamentary business, how it can help ensure that parliamentary time is used constructively for the remainder of this parliamentary session.
Minister Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, the scheduling of parliamentary business is proposed by Bureau, and it is for Parliament to agree business motions. In contributing to scheduling discussions at Bureau, ministers take committee and plenary capacity as well as Parliament's capacity to support bills' progression into account. As with all final years of Parliament, the period up to dissolution is going to be extremely busy, and there is responsibility in all MSPs and all parties to ensure we make the most effective use of that time. For my part, I am happy to commit to working constructively across this chamber to ensure we can make progress with all legislation the Parliament has to consider. However, once the Scottish Government or a member introduces a bill, its timetable is for the Parliament to determine.
Megan Gallagher.
The Minister will be aware that it's taken 53 months to get through over 40 bills, yet Holyrood is now expected to get through more than 20 in just 6 months. If we want good, well-scrutinised legislation and one that offers opposition as well as government members and backbenchers the time to debate, that needs to be planned well in advance, and it can't come at the expense of MSPs, particularly with young families and caring responsibilities, because that goes against the premise of this Parliament, which of course was to be family friendly. So does the Minister accept that he will need to relook at this and perhaps see if bills will be able to progress all the way to stage 3, or is it the case that MSPs will be sitting late into the night that might not produce legislation that is going to be beneficial for the people of Scotland?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, there's a lot in that. With your indulgence, I want to take a little bit of time because it's an important question that Megan Gallagher poses. Our data suggests that there are no more bills or SSIs before Parliament than is normal for this point in a parliamentary session. We believe that committees are taking a little bit longer to scrutinise bills than in previous sessions, which has seen bill timetables slip across the session. There's also been an increase in the number of amendments being lodged by MSPs, which of course impacts the time required at stages 2 and 3. Lastly, some members' bill before Parliament are more complex and lengthy than has been the case in previous sessions, and that increases the time required for Parliament to scrutinise the detail. But I absolutely understand the frustration of members when business runs late on a regularly or semi-regular basis, especially when it occurs at relatively short notice and impacts childcare, travel and the need to stay over. What I can say to Megan Gallagher is the Parliamentary Bureau is very much alive to that, and I offer her the assurance that I and other business managers are doing all we can to minimise impacts. It is, however, very difficult to do that at times around large bills which attract huge numbers of Stage 3 amendments, which more often than not are pressed to a vote. The upcoming land reform Stage 3 is a case in point, where there are almost 400 amendments to be considered, and we have, in this instance, been able to give members advance notice. But, as I say, I offer the member the assurance that where business managers can mitigate the impacts, they are seeking to do so.
Thank you. Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer. The complexity with the timetable is driven by the complexity of legislation, and the Minister has indicated that there's not a substantial difference. However, if we look at the Stage 2, there is substantial difference in the time that is taking to process. So will the Minister reconfirm the Government's commitment to work with all members across this chamber at all stages in the bill to ensure that we can seek agreement early where it is available, or identify where actually the differences lie?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I absolutely give that commitment. I cannot guarantee, of course, the outcome of such discussions will satisfy the members concerned, but we have already seen many instances where an agreement, an agreed way forward can be reached. And if we are to manage the amending stages better and avoid scenarios such as Megan Gallagher highlighted, then it's absolutely imperative that members and the Government engage as early as possible and hopefully to a satisfactory conclusion.
Thank you. Question number 7, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Veterans Minister has had with ministerial colleagues regarding the role of local authorities in maintaining Commonwealth war graves to a national standard.
Minister Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, across my 2 spells as Veterans Minister, I have had no engagement with ministerial colleagues regarding the role of local authorities in maintaining Commonwealth war graves to a national standard, as this is not something which ever has been raised with me, but I look forward to hearing the concerns I suspect Mr Mountain intends bringing to my attention.
Edward Mountain.
And I thank the Minister for that answer. Minister, there's nearly 1,500 war graves across the Highlands spread over 192 graveyards, with veterans of the First and Second World Wars buried in them. Will the Minister undertake to speak to his Cabinet colleagues to ensure that proper guidance is issued to these local authorities regarding the upkeep of these graves? Because during my travels in the last 10 years, I have found too many war graves to be in very poor conditions, with the graves actually collapsing in some cases and not being maintained to a standard where you can read what's on the gravestone. Thank you.
Minister.
President Officer, if I may, I want to take this opportunity to place on record that, as with Edward Mountain, I have enormous respect for the work of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. In Scotland alone, they maintain in excess of 1,300 sites commemorating more than 21,000 casualties, and it's even more to their credit that they prioritise repair over replacement to uphold the long-term integrity of these spaces and protect them as dignified places of remembrance. I'm very concerned to hear what he's just imparted to the Chamber. I'm happy to explore this further with the member. Beyond that, I'm planning to arrange a gathering of local authority, armed forces and veterans champions in due course, and would absolutely commit to include this on the agenda. I would hope, if we do that effectively, we could avoid the need to issue guidance such as he calls for, but I'm open to exploring that further with him in the aftermath of having that meeting.
Question number 8, Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo in relation to its overseas tours and performances in light of the reported contribution to the tattoo's reputation and economic impact in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
I congratulate the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo on its 75th anniversary, the success of the first show under new creative director Alan Lane, and the £750,000 in charitable giving provided during 2025. The Scottish Government-led Brand Scotland partnership maximises domestic and international opportunities to promote Scotland. Through its work, we showcase the tattoo annually, amplifying its impact during August in Edinburgh and year-round, alongside our other globally recognised festivals. Scottish Government officials will soon meet tattoo counterparts to explore further collaboration on international ambitions, building on previous partnership work such as Tartan Week and the Washington DC Tattoo in the United States of America.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Edinburgh Military Tattoo is a highlight of the Edinburgh Festival season, drawing over 200,000 attendees each year, with a significant proportion being international visitors from more than 100 countries. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that by boosting global promotion of Scotland, it not only puts Scotland on the world map, but also helps boost tourism in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Visit Scotland works closely with the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo to promote Scotland internationally, using the event's global profile to inspire overseas visitors to experience our culture and heritage. This collaboration is particularly valuable during the Tattoo's international tours and major showcases such as Scotland Week in New York. The Tattoo strengthens Scotland's reputation as a world-class events destination, helping attract international audiences and drive sustainable tourism. And alongside our diverse portfolio of major arts and cultural events, it plays a vital role in promoting Scotland's creativity, landscapes and warm welcome to visitors from around the world.
Thank you. That concludes that portfolio. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next.
Thank you. I think we'll just maybe make a wee start whilst all this is happening. And so the next portfolio this afternoon is Justice and Home Affairs. And at question 1, I call Evelyn Tweed.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to improve access to legal aid for survivors of domestic abuse.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government continues to work closely with stakeholders to support victims and survivors of domestic abuse to get the right support that they need. In addition to the current duty care system where all eligible costs are met, we provide an annual grant funding to the Scottish Women's Rights Centre of £230,000 per year. We also fund the public legal services through the Civil Legal Assistance Office and the Public Defence Solicitor's Office, which can operate across a wide geographical area. We are actively reviewing the legal aid framework to ensure it is fair, accessible and responsive to the needs of vulnerable individuals.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Domestic abuse survivors in my constituency are reporting great difficulty in finding legal aid solicitors. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to address barriers to access outside the Central Belt and in particular rural areas.
Minister.
Thank you. The legal aid system is generally effective in delivering help to those that need it. However, we do recognise that there are some challenges in relation to certain types of cases and locations as well. While civil solicitors have often been largely based in city centres near to the courts, they've always covered a wide geographical area. And I can reassure the member that solicitors in all parts of Scotland are able to access funding for work carried out under the legal assistance schemes, and to those schemes are flexible enough to allow solicitors to travel to any part of the country to carry out work should it not be possible to instruct a local agent. That notwithstanding, as part of the discussions around the criteria for a new traineeship fund, my officials are currently exploring whether there is a need to be specific in targeting geographical areas of or types in this case.
Supplementary, Pam Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The evidence we have taken through the Equalities and Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee has painted a shocking picture when it comes to survivors of domestic abuse accessing legal aid. We have heard of survivors being denied legal aid because they were unable to provide figures for their household income. But how would they know even their household income when their abusive partner has complete control over their finances? Therefore, I would like to ask the Minister what action has been taken to ensure that survivors have access to legal aid when they have no access to their own finances.
Minister.
Absolutely, and I thank the member for her question. As she's probably aware, domestic abuse organisations are not allowed by law or regulation to hire lawyers to support women and children. However, the Regulation of Legal Services Bill that passed in May that the member and the Conservatives did not support will remove restrictions preventing charities, law centres and citizen advice bodies from directly employing solicitors to provide certain legal aid to some of the country's most vulnerable citizens. And in addition, this will provide third sector organisations to directly employ legal professions to undertake reserved legal services such as domestic abuse.
And supplementary, Polly McNeill.
Lawyers have said for some time that they're leaving the legal aid sector in significant numbers due to inadequate remuneration and unsustainable working environment. In fact, many lawyers have said that the pendulum has swung so far that the lack of legal aid defence lawyers is creating a backlog impacting victims of sexual crime. And that is in part because, as the Minister will know, that those who are accused of sexual crimes must employ a lawyer. Therefore, I know that the Minister, and I do welcome the training fund announcement, but what other action is being taken and what progress is the Government actually making to stop lawyers leaving the profession that we so desperately need? Minister.
Thank you, and I thank Pauline McNeill for that question. And I think this is where a lot of work is undergoing at the moment. You'll know about the legal aid reform, and we're not going to be able to do in legislation this parliamentary term, but there is work undergoing at the moment. The Scottish Government is investing record levels of funding to support victims through a wide range of frontline services, including specialist legal advice. And this year's budget was at a record high with total legal aid fund investment of £165 million, which is demand-led, so all eligible costs will be met regardless of the cost. Legal aid is available to victims of domestic and gender-based violence seeking protection through civil actions where they meet the statutory eligibility criteria. I appreciate there are some challenges, and that's why I am working with the legal profession to move forward how we conquer these challenges.
Question number 2, Michael Mara.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of reports of rising levels of knife crime in Dundee over the summer, how it is supporting Police Scotland and local partners to prevent and reduce incidents of violent crime.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, whilst of little comfort to victims, recorded crime in Dundee City has continued its downward trend, reducing by 3% since 2021, including reductions in non-sexual crimes of violence and crimes of common assault. We, of course, remain vigilant about tackling any crimes of violence which can cause devastation for families and communities. And we are providing Police Scotland with increased funding of £1.64 billion this year and have invested £6 million in the implementation of the violence prevention framework over the past 3 years. This year, that includes up to £1.2 million for the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit and nearly £300,000 for the delivery of Youth Links Scotland's No Knives Better Lives programme.
Michael Mara.
Cabinet Secretary is correct. That will be of little comfort to the people of Dundee. There's been a series of stabbings, murders and attempted murders in the city over recent months that have hit the headlines and are creating a real climate of fear for many residents. And despite the Cabinet Secretary's claims, we know the SNP is not supporting our police officers. On the SNP's watch, police officer numbers continue to fall, down 1,000 in the last decade. 1,000 fewer officers on our streets that are confiscating those offensive weapons, investigating crimes and keeping us all safe. And just yesterday, the General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation warned that Police Scotland is at a crossroads, citing falling officer numbers and rising demands. David Kennedy said the situation was simply unsustainable. He's right, isn't he, Cabinet Secretary?
Cabinet Secretary. Presiding Officer, let me, as always, put on record my appreciation of Scotland's police officers and also police staff for the crucial job they do in keeping our community safe. And if I can also acknowledge to Mr Mara that I am very aware of the incidents that have taken place across Dundee in recent times. In terms of police numbers, while the deployment of police officers is a matter for the Chief Constable, our record funding has ensured that since the start of 2024, Police Scotland have welcomed 1,500 new police officers to the rank. That is the biggest recruitment programme that they have had since the establishment of Police Scotland in 2013. And in terms of resource for next year's budget, I will of course be scrutinising that with the SPA along with Police Scotland, and my engagement has started in this matter. Public finances do of course remain stretched, and the Chancellor's recent spending review has certainly taken us back to austerity, but as always we'll do our very best. We'll always do our very best for frontline services.
And I have 3 requests for supplementaries. I intend to take all 3, but they need to be brief. Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise if there will be any increase in Scottish Government support for the successful Medics Against Violence programme?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we have committed over £6 million to support a range of prevention and early intervention activities, and that includes Medics Against Violence, who have been awarded nearly £350,000 in this financial year. That's an increase on the previous year, and this supports the delivery of work within our schools, providing violence prevention messages to almost 5,000 pupils last year, for example, and it also supports the delivery of the very successful Navigator programme across 8 emergency departments, as well as the Youth Navigator service.
Liam Kerr.
Presiding Officer, between April 24 to March 25, crimes involving knives and weapons in Aberdeen schools increased by 150%. Since the beginning of 2024, more than 40 weapons have been seized in Aberdeen schools, including knives, blades and BB guns. So what action is the Government taking to prevent weapons entering schools? And will the Cabinet Secretary encourage the rollout of regular anti-weapons lessons?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Mr Kerr is quite correct that the work that takes place in our schools to support good behaviour and to ensure our children have the skills and resilience to lead successful lives, and that includes law-abiding lives. I won't repeat in chamber the information that the Cabinet Secretary for Education has frequently updated Parliament on.
And brief supplementary, Katie Clark.
As the Cabinet Secretary says, the No Knives Better Lives programme has been successful and credited with helping with an 85% reduction in the number of young people convicted of handling knives since 2008. However, despite a recent increase in knife crimes, there has also been a 12% reduction in the funding of No Knives Better Lives since 2022 in real terms. So with the forthcoming budget, will the Cabinet Secretary look at this again and reinstate funding and look at what further this programme can do?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, Presiding Officer, we will look at all matters in relation to funding that supports community safety. It is imperative to see that there's never any justification for any form of violence, and that includes carrying knives. So the work with young people in terms of emphasising that it's never safe to carry a knife and there's absolutely no prestige in it is crucial. Other work that is being funded by the Scottish Government via the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit is the delivering of preventative education inputs in areas where violence is higher. So that's a very targeted approach. And the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit in partnership are developing a deterrent support package, again, for those young people at highest risk of this type of offending.
Question number 3, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on legal enforcement measures being taken with regard to retailers committing age-of-sale offences when selling age-restricted items such as vapes and cigarettes.
Minister Swanryan.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. There are a range of age-restricted products in Scotland, and legislation is specific to each of these. In relation to tobacco and vapes, local authorities have powers to issue fixed penalty notices to retailers and individuals who commit offences related to the age of sale. Where premises are subject to more than 3 enforcement actions in a 2-year period, the local authority may apply to the court for an order banning the sale of tobacco and vaping products from that premises for up to 24 months. Last year, trading standards officers with Young Volunteers attempted 662 test purchases of vapes and 251 test purchases of tobacco at premises across the whole of Scotland, and in 2024 to 2025 financial year, 56 fixed penalty notices were issued for tobacco and 217 for nicotine vapour products.
Daniel Johnson.
I remind the Chamber of my register of interest, and I thank the Minister for that answer. But the reality is these powers are just simply not being used to the degree that we would expect. In 23-24, there were just 128 vapour product age-of-sale contraventions. That's just an average of 2.6 per local authority, and there have only been 7 applications for court orders, as described, in the last 2 years. Now, any of us in this chamber looking at our mailbags will know that this is a scourge in our communities that needs to be clamped down on. I recently had a constituent who she has bank receipts and bank statements showing that her children have been buying vapes from a local shop. So what we need is action. So what will the government do to shut down shops and use these powers to stop these sales? And when will we start seeing evidence such as bank statements being used to take immediate action rather than prevarication?
Minister.
Thank you, and I actually thank the member for that. I have huge concerns about youth vaping and nicotine products over many years. It is up to local authorities are responsible for enforcing the ban of single-use vapes, and trading standards officers have the powers to issue fixed penalty notice and £800 for non-compliance. The Scottish Government has provided £300,000 in additional funding to support local authorities to tackle specifically this. This was after the implementation of the single-use vapes. However, in line with the principles of the Verity House Agreement, this funding is not ring-fenced, but it is up to local authorities to determine how best to prioritise this work in line with local needs. Maybe if I could just also advise the member he may be aware of the UK-wide tobacco and vapes bill that's currently going through, and if this is passed, this will introduce a range of restrictions, age of sale, advertising, free distribution, retail register applicable to those products as well.
Brief supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you. We are seeing a worrying increase in the uptake of vaping among young people. So can the Minister update on what the current UK Government plans are in regard to the tobacco and vaping bill and the consequential LCM that fell before last year's election but would see some control being introduced to the advertising and promotion of vaping products?
Minister.
Thank you. The Scottish Parliament gave its unanimous legislative consent to the UK-wide tobacco and vapes bill in May, and I'm pleased that this bill is expected to complete its passage within the current UK parliamentary session. So new powers in this bill will empower the Secretary of State to regulate product features, packaging, ingredients and flavourings in relation to vapes with the consent of Scottish ministers. It will also introduce new restrictions on the advertising, sponsorship, free distribution and nominal pricing of vapes across the UK's 4 nations, and I hope this will help prevent those underage from being targeted.
And brief supplementary, Sharon Dow.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Retailers tell us that asking for proof of age can often be a trigger point for violence or abuse if the sale is refused, and response times for Police Scotland are poor if they even turn up at all. Can the Minister tell us what communication she's had with Police Scotland on this and how many prosecutions there has been under the Protection of Retail Workers Act 2021?
Minister.
Thank you. I don't have the details on how many prosecutions, but I may be right to the member regarding that. I do engage quite frequently with retailers, and it was raised with me prior to the single ban use coming in June. But one of the things it is our commitment to the new deal for business that the Scottish Government does meet regularly with the Regulatory Review Group on the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. And we will ensure that any impact of the proposals on business is fully understood and that policy implementation is effective and proportionate while still delivering the beneficial outcomes of the population's health sought.
Question number 4, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government what actions it can take to address the misuse of e-bikes and off-road vehicles in light of reported concerns that it is a growing community safety issue.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. We remain committed to working collaboratively with local authorities and Police Scotland through the Road Safety Framework Strategic Partnership Board. I know I've met with several MSPs earlier this year to discuss the concerns which led to a summer safety campaign. Enforcement is a matter for Police Scotland, and local teams are best placed to identify misuse and to prevent future incidents. And they are undertaking initiatives, including work with delivery companies. Police funding has increased to a record £1.62 billion this year, and we will continue to engage with the UK Government, which holds reserve powers over off-road vehicles, including licensing and regulation.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Minister for that answer, for acknowledging a meeting with myself and colleagues on 2 occasions now to explore this matter and look at it further, with one tangible outcome, as the Minister noted, was that summer safety campaign that I had called for. But there remains many ongoing concerns, including my concern that when off-road vehicles and e-bikes are confiscated by Police Scotland for misuse, often causing danger, damage and contributing to antisocial behaviour, vehicles are often returned with little consequence, and this must change. Will the Scottish Government review provisions in this area, and will the Minister again meet with myself and colleagues to continue to progress this matter and a range of other matters, keeping that partnership alive?
Minister.
Yes, thank you. And I am sure myself and Minister Jim Fairley would be happy to meet with members to keep this conversation alive. We do support Police Scotland and its partners in dealing with the misuse of vehicles. Across Scotland, police have seized 816 e-bikes and scooters in the last year, and this has mainly been on an account of no licence or insurance. So enforcement is a matter for Police Scotland, and local policing teams are best placed to identify misuse and work to prevent future incidents. Road policing, they are currently leading on a development of new guidance on Police Scotland's approach to returning of confiscated vehicles, and I am keen to work with all interested MSPs to determine potential opportunities for further government action, including approaches to the UK Government.
And brief supplementary, Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In response to my PQ on the 17th of September highlighting the criminality associated with e-bike use, The Minister stated that Police Scotland is keeping its approach to the illegal use of e-bikes and e-scooters under review. This doesn't help the victims of crime. It brings no confidence to communities that are plagued by these thieves, nor does it say we are serious about cracking down on the criminals or their antisocial behaviour associated with their use. Respectful of the answer you've just provided to Mr Doris, will the Scottish Government finally provide the resources, guidance and training that Police Scotland need to allow them to crack down on this sort of crime?
Minister.
Thank you. I would hope that the member would appreciate the several times that ministers have met with members to tackle this issue this year. So it's not an issue that is being ignored. If I could just say also, Police Scotland, they have a record £1.64 billion in this budget year. So yes, as I said to Mr Doris, there is ongoing work by Police Scotland, specifically around the confiscation of the vehicles, and hopefully we will be able to update you at the next meeting.
Always through the Chair. Question number 5, the member is not present. Question number 6, Liam MacArthur.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of any impact of sustained overcrowding in prisons on suicide and self-harm prevention.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the profound impact that overcrowding is having on those living and working in our prisons. That is why I set out last week the immediate action on early release we intend to take in response. The Scottish Prison Service and the National Health Service continue to prioritise prisoners experiencing heightened distress levels or thoughts of self-harm or suicide, and remain committed to meeting the mental health and wellbeing needs of those in its care. SPS is also working at pace on the overhaul of the Talk to Me suicide prevention strategy. By understanding the high risk and complex environment of a prison, this improved strategy will enhance holistic support and ultimately save lives.
Liam MacArthur.
Since 2021, more than 4,000 incidents of self-harm have been reported in Scottish prisons and over 1,000 in the last year alone. At the same time, we're seeing our prisons operating at unsustainable levels of overcrowding, with reconviction rates remaining above pre-pandemic levels and remand numbers stubbornly high. If we're serious about reducing incarceration sustainably and avoiding the sort of emergency releases that we have now had in recent months, then we must ensure that prisoners have access to proper mental health support, which is vital to achieving rehabilitation and securing public safety. So will the Cabinet Secretary give an update on the timeframe for replacing the suicide strategy that was supposed to be replaced back in 2023, and what progress has been made in boosting the mental health experts that are present in our prisons around Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I thank Mr MacArthur for his question. He is quite correct to highlight and underscore that our rising prison population is the most critical operational and strategic challenge that's currently faced by our prison service. But there is also, as recently highlighted by the Prison Governors Association, a human cost to overcrowding. The member will recall the commitments I made in response to the Fatal Accident Inquiry recommendations, the statement I made in Parliament in response to the deaths of Katie Allen and William Lindsay. In terms of the overhaul of Talk to Me, the final report will be published, that final independent report from an independent specialist, Professor Towell, will be published in October, and by the end of this calendar year the Scottish Prison Service will publish their suicide prevention pathway.
Question 7 has been withdrawn. I call question 8, which I can squeeze in if I have brief questions and succinct replies. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what actions Police Scotland is taking to deal with problem street drinkers.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to tackling all forms of antisocial behaviour and recognises that community safety is a shared endeavour. Local authorities and Police Scotland have statutory duties to develop and share antisocial behaviour strategies and local policing plans which target and address local needs. Police Scotland is, of course, receiving record funding of £1.64 billion this year, and of course each local authority has its own set set of bylaws determining where you can drink in public places.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Problem drinkers congregating and carrying out antisocial behaviour in city centre sites, including in Aberdeen, is becoming an ever-increasing problem. I recognise that this is an operational matter, but will the Cabinet Secretary consider asking Police Scotland to take a zero-tolerance stance in dealing with those folk involved in street drinking and antisocial behaviour?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I will certainly discuss with Justice partners what is the best approach in the best circumstances. I'd be very interested to hear more about where good practice exists and what the evidence tells us. The member will of course be aware that local authorities and Police Scotland are under a legal duty to maintain a strategy to tackle antisocial behaviour in their area, and I'll keep the member informed.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on Justice and Home Affairs. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you.